All right, guys. Thought I'd do a little bit of an update today. I'm sort of starting to get in the preparation stages of heading back to Spain. Um, I'm quite happy to see that the airlines are looking at suing the UK government relating to the way the government's looking at handling people travelling. Um, my personal view is the government is just bundled its way through this whole thing, but at the same time it is a difficult circumstance, but hey ho, aren't we supposed to already have an outline for these sort of things? Didn't we do a load of work around pandemic training and all this sort of stuff? And I believe there was some around the chemical attacks, that sort of stuff, which would have actually gone through a similar structure in the sense of it spreads. So I know pandemic may be treating a little bit differently, but I'm sure there would have been a lot of overlaps. And I'm not talking about recently, I'm talking about in the last 15, 20 years, as the expectations of a pandemic was already expected, dirty bombs, all this sort of stuff had actually all gone through the motions of preparedness, and yet it was just a complete sham. A bit like all the stock for the NHS, for the PPE and everything, allowed to go out of date. Nobody's really talked about who was responsible for that and why it went out of date, because it just seems rather stupid. Because it sounds like the goods were needed in the hospitals anyway, so putting the new stuff in there and then taking the old ones out is what something like a warehouse normally does. So maintaining a large quantity of something shouldn't have been too difficult. I think somebody pilfered the cash for something else, but nobody seems to want to talk about that bit, which is a bit annoying, because it just shows you the sort of incompetence we're dealing with. So I'm hoping we get some guidance, proper guidance, with a bit of pressure from the airlines, because the airlines want to crack on with business. And I often hear these people that go, "Oh, these people are being selfish." It's like, if you're worried, don't go out. I'm not telling you what to do. And people like myself have been stuck away from family and whatever for months. If you don't want to go out your front door, fine, don't. But I don't see why I should be penalised for other people's unwillingness to take any risks. A lot of the stuff I do is pretty much common sense. I was going to do this video today at the park, for example, which is only over here. But there must be at least 2,000 people in there. No, there's no social distancing being adhered to or anything else. It's just lots and lots of people. And I'll be perfectly blunt, most of them aren't actually from the UK. It's not. I'm not sort of insinuating anything, but the point being, even in the supermarkets, I do find there's certain parties that just can't even follow an arrow on the floor. But are you going to be able to prevent that? The answer is no. Those same idiots will still be bundling around and walking into people because they are idiots. There's no other word for it. I mean, you can't make it any more simple. It's everywhere, this media stuff, and yet they can't follow an arrow on the floor. That's how stupid some people are. But am I really worried about it? The answer is no. The main thing is you take care of yourself. Like myself, went around the park, stupid amount of people there. At least 150 people in the kids' park, with kids and adults. So I just thought, you know what? Nah, I'll go home. And that's just in the little park area. There's at least 2,000 people over there. So for me, I think it should be a case of a lot of people should be able to use common sense. Me flying back to Spain, am I worried about the distances between me and the guy next to me? The answer is no. I'll just use a bit of common sense. I'll wear a mask. In fact, I've got one here. This is all the way from Spain. April made this one for me. She made me a couple of masks and sent me some other ones. So the point is, I do have some masks, and I don't have the problem of wearing those, and I do recommend wearing sunglasses or glasses just for a bit of eye protection, because you can absorb things through your eyes. Wear gloves if you want. Use some common sense. It's up to you. But personally, I want to go home. I've been here 3 months now, and I'll be perfectly blunt. I've worked through most of this because I've got a a heavy workload. Because I've actually ended up with 8 extra days from weekend working and stuff because of the work that I've still been doing over the weekends to meet the deadlines that we have. So for me, it's time to go home. And I'm hopeful that the airlines, Ryanair, Jet2, British Airways, etc., apply some pressure to the government. I think it should be up to people like myself to make my own decisions. And like I says, you put all that stuff out there, you'll still get some moron walking the wrong way up an aisle. You'll still get somebody standing with their other friends in the middle of B&Q talking, blocking the aisle for other people going up and down. I know what I'm saying, the majority of these people, it hasn't been British people. I'll be perfectly blunt, and it sort of riles me a little bit because I hate saying that sort of stuff, but it's true. Because they haven't been speaking English. But I have no problem with people where they come from or what they're doing or whatever. What I do have an issue with is the inability to follow basic instruction. But you ain't going to be able to prevent that. And to be fair, most of them ain't going to be on flights to Alicante, so I'm not too fussed. I'm more concerned when I'm picking up my bottled water or my milk or whatever, when they're just wandering around. Just sort of brings thoughts of zombie nations and stuff. But trying to keep positive. But this is why everyone gets locked down severely, is because these idiots exist. It's always somebody else's fault. It's not their fault. It's not their fault they walk the wrong way up an aisle. They can't read English. There's a big arrow on the floor. I think that's fairly understandable for everybody. Same as 2 people with a 2 meter distance between them. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. If they can't understand that sort of stuff, there's simply no hope for them. So, but I just don't want them spreading anything to anybody else. But I do think I had this in November. I do wonder if you can catch it more than once. But obviously it's going to take them ages to actually work out what they're doing. Because from a doctor's side and a scientific side, they don't want to be giving too much information either. The reason for that is the media print it as gospel. So if you said, we may have a cure, and then the other bit follows on from that going, but it could take us up to 2 years to test it, make sure this is right. They just said, Oxford found cure. That's the sort of thing. They completely miss all the other bits where they're saying, we're not sure, we're still testing. So then they start going, better not say anything at all. And that doesn't help either. But personally, I think we're through the worst of it. I really do. And as I've said before, this line I think it's about 15,000 people for the UK hospitals. That's the number we're not really monitoring, which is what I call a true number, which is the number of people in hospital with COVID, because that means they've got to a point where they've needed medical care. They've also got to a point that they've had a recovery period in hospital, which means those people are a true figure. Going, we don't know how many cases there are, but according to the cases we got, no, forget all that nonsense, because you don't know. It's an unknown figure. The hospital figures are constant. Look at the care homes and nursing homes when they added those in and suddenly all the figures jumped. Why has that occurred? Well, firstly, they kept them out on purpose. If they didn't, I'm not going to say I call somebody a liar, but I would say they're being very dishonest with the truth. They left a lot of risks there. But just before we went into the pandemic, I don't know if any other guys were reading up on the notices that were sort of given to the healthcare for care homes and nursing homes. Things like they do not resuscitate notices, they're asking families to sign off. They were expecting large amounts of cases in those areas. and they didn't protect them. That's the end of it. There will be a lot of crocodile tears and all that sort of stuff coming in afterwards, but from everything I can see, they weren't expecting to save any of them. In fact, they didn't even try, because if they locked the places down, and basically, if somebody went into the hospital, they don't come back. Basically, they've got to go somewhere else and be quarantined. That would have made more sense. You just take them. If you leave a care home, you don't come back into it. At least until they've been validated it's clear and the care home's clear. Just simple things like that. I know it's not going to be the most convenient thing, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of facilities that are empty at the moment. So actually creating some emergency centres would not have been an issue. I'm sure a lot of businesses would have appreciated the business to do that. So yeah, and a lot of people go, oh well, in hindsight. But like I said, we've been preparing for this sort of stuff for years, and now we're being told, well, we weren't really ready. And it's like, how long do you need? The lessons learned at the end of this, I suspect, will have cover-ups all over it. So we'll never learn from it anyway. That's just the reality. It's just the way we seem to be these days. A lot of the decision makers, and I put that in with a sort of in brackets with a question mark, are business as usual people. They don't make decisions. They dither. They try and wait until somebody else makes a decision. That's why these things take forever to actually get a real response or action or responsibility and ownership. So yeah, it's been a bit frustrating. But yeah, 1st of July, I can see Jet2's looking at their flights opening them up, and Ryanair looking at opening up. Although I did see Ryanair dropped his numbers down. I think he was originally looking at 60% returning to usual service, but now it's down to about 40. But to be fair, I think he was going to start probably next week until all this stuff started coming through from the government. So his timetable's been altered. But it's been difficult being away from home this long. I mean, when I'm normally in this sort of situation, it's easy. Because, like, for example, when I went out to Amman, I knew I was going to be there for 4.5 months. So guess what? I don't think about going home. I think about how many weeks I've got left till I go home. So you're looking and going, right, I've got another 4 weeks or 3 months or whatever. And that's it. You don't focus on getting home. With this, I'm stuck in the bloody UK dithering mode where you're going, well, I want to book a flight, but I can't book a flight. It's like a Boris decision. It's like listening to one of the talks. Don't go out unless you need to go out. Don't go to work unless you need to go to work. All that sort of stuff. It's just like, make a decision and run with it. And I know they're getting excessive criticism. I'm looking at Channel 4 News every day. That's such a biased news system. I have to call it a system because it's very systematic in the way it's cherry picking things and very biased in the way it's approaching it. It seems very negative on the government, and at the same time, with all this stuff with the rioting and things, it seems to be very focused on showing that people are oppressed. My personal view is I haven't oppressed anybody in my life. I don't find people are sort of victimised in the UK. Don't get me wrong, if you're from a bad area and it's predominantly of one background, then you may feel victimised because guess what? That's an area that has a big problem with crime. The rest of it suddenly drops into that. Because if you go into, say, some of the places in Glasgow, it's predominantly white areas, and guess what? They're always being arrested and stuff because they're always up to it. They're always committing crimes and whatever. You will get accidentally caught and arrested for something you didn't do or whatever, just because you're in the wrong area, etc. That's life. It's got nothing to do with colour, creed, religion, or anything else. That's just that some of these areas are just crap. Yes, they're down as deprived areas, but why are they deprived? For Glasgow, it's because they built them. They moved everybody out the city. They got rid of all the what do you call it? The tenements, and built these concrete jungles out in the middle of nowhere, where originally they had no public transport, no services, no jobs, and they were just set up for failure. That is a government mistake and a government issue, but it's certainly not race, because guess what? All those people are Scottish. But I know in London they've had other areas where they've moved them around to clear areas, like places like the Docklands, I suppose, for what they call rejuvenation. But a lot of this problem is the fact that there's limited job access. And it's not about colour, creed, or anything else. A lot of this stuff is a lot of people aren't skilled enough for what's available in the market today. We've got a rise of automation. You look at McDonald's, people get that pay up, get the pay up. So the minimum wage goes up. And now we see a lot of automated tills. You see the same in supermarkets. You see at petrol stations, a lot of them you can do on your phone. That's what happens. The market changes. On top of that, there's a lot of people that just aren't skilled. And how that occurs is often not about creed, colour, or whatever, but actually the peers, the pressure you have from other people around you. There's a whole ream of stuff behind this, and when you look into it in greater detail, you see a lot of it is systematic in the sense of not systematic in the sense of being done on purpose, but it's systematic in the failure. It's a constant, because it's the same failures over and over again. And the biggest thing I find that's frustrating on this is when people try and blame it's because I'm this, it's because of that. It's because you need to refocus your energy. There will always be a reason not to do something. I've got a friend who does it all the time, and he frustrates me sometimes because there's always a reason he hasn't done this, hasn't done that. It was because of this, because of the ex-wife. Because it's like everybody has something that kicks them down. The point being is you can either accept that you failed and you just were going to fail the rest of your life, or you just go, right, I've got to learn from this and move forward. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of this problem comes from poor peers, in the sense of a lot of people don't have role models. A lot of people haven't got people to look up to or follow. And as such, they can go down a path of not really knowing what they want to do. I mean, oddly enough, I don't actually listen to Garth Brooks' music, and I've got to admit it's not really my type of music, but I was watching some of his documentary today. He was on about his parents, because his mother was very strong on you can achieve anything and all this sort of stuff, while his father was more, well, if you want to achieve that, you're going to have to put the effort in. If you want to fly, you have to achieve it. Nobody's going to give it to you. Now, I've seen a lot of people over the years that think the world owes them a living. Stupid amounts. It's the same when a lot of people assume there's a problem with something because you won't accept this, you won't accept that. Guess what? That's life. That's life. My hair's short. I'm not saying I have long blonde hair. That's just reality. There's many things that you can strive for perfection. It doesn't mean you'll ever reach it. Now, that's not being a negative person. It's the reality. The whole point is to do the best you can and be progressive. But it's a bit like throwing these statues that I'm seeing. I'm just thinking, what's that actually achieving? What's that achieving? You're throwing a statue in the canal in Bristol. Well done. Oh, he was a slave, but I don't know. If you write stuff out of history, it never happened. If you write stuff out of history, it happens again. That's the reality. But also, because people are so selective on what they actually want to talk about, the real debates never happen. Now, the thing about slavery is it's been ongoing, not just with whites and whatever. It's an ongoing problem. Even now, it's still a problem. But guess what? Can't talk about it. Not allowed to have an open debate on it, open discussion. Because you need to open that real can of worms. There's no point going, it's the white man's burden and all this sort of stuff. It's a case of, you know what? Let's really talk about it. Let's really talk about the roots of where it came from. What's the current issues with it? Where is all this issue coming from? Who's creating these issues? What's the output? Taking statues down doesn't really, for me, I don't think it makes that much difference. You know, if anything, there's been a few people irritated it's been taken down, and other people irritated it was there. But at the same time, I think the more important lesson is actually to understand that historically, that was a time where that would have been acceptable. Remove that from history, you're not preventing it from repeating itself. You're better off discussing it and identifying where and who were these parts and parties of people. You know, who did this? Why did they do this? All this sort of stuff. Because I think it's very relevant in that perspective. But dragging it down and throwing it in a canal, what's that achieve? It's a bit like Churchill. You're instantly creating a conflict. You pull that statue down because you're anti-imperial, you're anti-empire. I'll be perfectly blunt with you. I'm not a socialist. And I'm not a communist. Because guess what? That's what some people will push it from the other way. You must be a load of communists. You must be this. I'm not a communist. I'm not. You know what? This is the point. Have proper debates about this stuff. If you have got an issue with something, it's about the expressive media and the ability to have proper open conversations. But if you want to hate and tell people this and da-da-da, you've got to be able to take it as much as you give it. And that's the reality. A lot of people don't like it. They don't want to hear the other side. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of the newsreel stuff I've seen recently about before my childhood was very offensive. I mean, you look at Lenny Henry's sort of... The documentary on Lenny Henry is quite interesting in that sense. You look at some of the other stuff that goes on around the use of certain words and stuff. It's very, very noticeable that there was a problem. But guess what? My childhood was 30 years ago. A lot of things have changed since then. And a lot of it had to change, you know, through progression, through better education, etc. But I do think with the mentality today, it's very peculiar, because I often hear people saying, you remember in the 70s there was this, you remember that. It's not the 70s. It's not the same as the 70s. You have to take that difference in time, that things have moved forward from then. The Equality Act of 2010 is an example of something that changed. You look at the legislation changes and the legal action around equality and diversity, etc. There's been massive changes. See, myself, I'm live and let live. I've got no issue with anybody, but I wouldn't go and tear a statue down. Because, to be honest, a slave trader 150 years ago, it was a completely different time. Do I agree with the guy? No. But I wasn't there. I couldn't sit and say to him, I'm not happy with what you're doing, because it was a completely different time. I mean, if you look through history, you'll find horrible stuff that goes on with pretty much every nation. And some of them are still doing it today. And a lot of it doesn't go in the media. But the point being is, I don't think the UK has as much problems as being led by the press at the minute. Now, don't get me wrong, the issues where there's one today I was watching with a banker being harassed by the Metropolitan Police. Now, was that a race case? Well, I would have to say you'd have to look into the Metropolitan Police and the problems they've had with other cases that had nothing to do with race. My personal view is I have very little faith in the police generally. Not because I'm a criminal or doing anything else. It's just I know some of the stuff they've got up to in the past, and they're not above criminality. I don't have that level of trust in them. So I can understand where some people get frustrated about certain things because of this, blah blah blah. But I do think it's another issue around the reality is that it's a police problem, and I don't think it's a race problem. I think it's a police problem. So yeah, I'm not even touching on the American guy that was the Black Lives Matter movement stuff, and it's not because I have an issue with it. I mean, the main thing I have there is I'm not American. That's an American discussion. But the guy was no saint, and that's one thing that bugged me about the media. They'll go, oh well, yeah, but you can't really put his previous criminal information that freely available because people then judge him. But it's okay to do the reverse, as if he's the local pastor being arrested. And that's where you've got to draw the line, because if you're not showing one side, don't show the other. That's my personal view on it. From my view for everybody else, is don't get sucked into it. We're not fed all the information most of the time. We're not fed the correct information in the sense of being able to make an informed decision. But ultimately, a lot of it is to incite hate one way or the other. And it's at that point, it's time to switch off and do something else. It's sad. I find it really sad that things are like that. Which is why I'm going to cut this off here and move on to something positive. So, from the Spanish side, I'm looking to get the house. One of the things you may not be aware of, which is why I'm sticking on the end of the video, so you've had to watch most of the video to actually get to this. We've actually been in negotiations with a homeowner pretty much opposite where we're living currently. So no removal van needed. Just move it over bit by bit. Nice 3-bedroom with a roof, terrace. Will need a lot of renovation works, but I really don't care. The price we're looking at is sensible. I say sensible in the sense of I've got 50% of the cash up front, which means I can pay the other half off in about 2 years total. Which means we own it outright, full renovation, do that one up and buy another one, and then buy another one, and then buy another one. I want to get to 5 properties in 5 years. That's the big goal. So I think we're achieving that quite well so far, considering we've had a mass pandemic and all the other problems. But yeah, I do look forward to getting home. I do look forward to spending some time with the wife and kids. Got ordered fishing gear and stuff. Going to teach my son how to spin. Do some with a spinning rod off the beach. And then later on, once the first house is up and running, we'll be getting a fishing boat. I know Eagle's got a boat that we're looking at renovating, but I'm thinking, you know what, let's bite the bullet and buy a proper boat between us. I'm going to go fishing when we want, have a proper cabin and everything in it, so yeah, chill out. Just enjoy life, because that's the key to all this. Enjoying life. Don't get wrapped into all the negative stuff out there. It's very easy. I see people getting so angry about this. I'm like, but what's the outcome? If there's no outcome in there, nothing positive going to come out of it, why bother? It's just not worth the hassle. It's like my work. I've been overloaded with work since I started. I couldn't believe I've been there 9 months now. But I'm pretty much at a point where it's starting to tail off, and instead of having to be full throttle all the time, I've been catching up on 3 years worth of work. We're pretty much nearly up to date, and once we're up to date, it'll start rolling much easier, because I've got a structure to all this which never existed before. I'm looking forward to getting that up and running, which also means there'll be more videos. I think I'll record all the stuff we're getting through the airports and stuff when I head there, because I know a lot of people are going to be interested in that. And what if the airports are cancelled? I know someone's going to say, well, maybe you won't get home like that. I'll tell you now, doesn't matter. I'll drive. Got a brand new BMW outside that I pay a small fortune in tax on. It's my company car. I can drive all the way to Spain. Not a problem. Already priced it up. Already got 2 ferry options going into Bilbao, Santander, or into Calais or Dunkirk, and driving all the way down. Whatever happens, I'm going home. Well, my wife still remembers what I look like, at least. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.